Hello all. Okay. Um, I am Navit Tzadik, and I'd like to start with um, first talking about this incredible Yom Yun, um, and um, how it's actually part of a much wider, bigger Beit Midrash. This incredible Yom Yun happens every year for Pesach, and we also have um, an incredible Beit Midrash online all year round with lots of different shurim, halacha, gemara, Tanakh, and I invite all the women on this Yom Yun to be part of our learning community in general and to come learn with us um, and be part of that Beit Midrash. Um, Everyone has a busy schedule, but it's just an incredible way to be part of learning Torah and to fit that into your regular schedule. We have different shurim throughout the week that happens into two different semesters. I also want to invite all the women who are listening to this to be part of our incredible summer Torah mission, our summer program, Nishmat summer program. We have incredible Torah learning, and along with just being here in Israel and hands-on and um, going out and seeing and meeting people, incredible people in Israel at this time. And also just learning a lot of Torah, which is exactly, I think, what we all need chizuk at this time. So I invite everybody to be part of our incredible summer program and to look us up online and to register for that. Okay, I want to start with a story, actually, hot off the press kind of story from last night. Last night, some of us were still up late at night, and 2 o'clock in the morning, and we hear a siren go off. And we all go into the safe room and wake up all the little kids and take everyone out of their beds and go into the mamad, the security room at home. And as we're in the room, and there was a lot of talk about it beforehand because we understood with the Iran attack, what's going to be happening, somewhat to some extent. There was no camps today for schools and no um, programming that was planned before Pesach for kids. So this was a situation, and we all go into the mamad after talking about it a little bit before. And as we're there, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I kept thinking about, wow, this is Belayla Hazeh, meaning Am Yisrael is always constantly supposed to be thinking about how we're supposed to feel like we were the ones who left Egypt. And there was an incredible feeling of being all together in one chavua, like the way Am Yisrael eat the Korban Pesach, and being all together and still being able to chat with the rest of the family members in different parts of Israel, how they're doing, where they are. One family member with 10 other families in one security room, more of a public space than not in their home. And that experience made me think a lot about what was happening actually that night and through the Yetziat Mitzrayim. So like I said beforehand, we started with a couple hours before, a little bit of anxiety, some of the kids talking about it before, what's going to happen, how, what's going to be. And when it actually happened, it was a lot less scary. Everyone was all together and it was a lot of bonding feeling. And I kept thinking about how Am Yisrael were preparing, leaving beforehand, even before they left Egypt. There was a lot of preparation, and this has been their whole lives. Hundreds of years in Mitzrayim, and this is their whole lives. And now it's like preparing the kids a couple of days before, taking their Korban Pesach already and getting ready and explaining, and just waiting and putting the blood on the doorposts, closing the door, the families all in one group, and waiting for that midnight to happen. in the end, Am Yisrael left be'etzem hayom hazeh, meaning during the day with their heads raised, left Egypt, and that was how Yetziat Mitzrayim happened. But that feeling of how's it going to be, and it actually playing out, was an incredible feeling of how this actually happened. So part of what led me to thinking about all this, besides Pesach coming up and everything happening in the middle of the night, was also thinking about the Korban Pesach, and I know Rabbanit spoke a little bit about this Achdut and about how that brings us to Achdut. So the Maharal, I'm going to share sources in a few minutes when I start talking about where this is leading up. But the Maharal talks about how the Korban Pesach is supposed to lead Am Yisrael to Achdut and to this incredible formation of one nation. And he explains how every part of the different halacha of the Korban Pesach, from the fact that we're not allowed to eat it when it's cooked, because when you cook meat, it'll all sort of, with water, it'll sort of like gets broken up. But when you roast it, it becomes like formed into one thing, and you can't, cut any of the break it in the bones, and it has to be all put in one way. You also have to be part of a group beforehand, and you have to stick with that group. And all that sort of forms this incredible achdut and being formed as one group. So there's nothing more, I think, at least in terms of sacrifices and korbanot, that are supposed to lead us into that achdut feeling. But it was also interesting because you're also very secluded from the rest of the people, right? When you're eating the Korban Pesach, similar to how we were last night, you are by yourself. You're in one chavura. It could be you're with like 10 other families eating it. It could be you have like a bunch of other people from your community, family members, but you're all in one chavura. And we even say to the wise son who asks, what's going on, kind of thing, at the Seder night, we even say, there's no after parties, each person going from chavura to chavura. You go to like different groups. You stick with your one group. And I think it's interesting to see how dafka from there, that brings us into this formation of Achdut. I want this to sort of lead us into talking about what many people are talking to today, and I saw also a lot of what Neema was talking about in terms of bringing the nation to be one, and what can lead us to that, what can bring us to that, and what we should be looking toward. So I think if we just read Tanakh and read the psukim in the Tanakh, after Am Yisrael leaves Mitzrayim, and they get their freedom, and it was a process, of course. The leading up to it, the leaving, the amount of belief that they needed along the way, and being in the desert. At some point, they built. Hashem says, "I want you to build a mikdash." Right, Asuli Mikdash, v'shachanti b'tocham, and this is how the Shekhinah is going to be present amongst Am Yisrael. So I want to concentrate on that. I want to talk about the Mikdash, not inside the Mishkan, but the Mikdash as the presence, the one place of the presence of Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, and see how that is supposed to form the nation to bring us to be one. And actively, meaning how do we do that now? Is this going to be something that's going to, like some people say, fall from the sky? So yesterday there were all these incredible drones that we see over Har HaBayit, and if anybody thought like how's this actually going to happen, that the third Beit HaMikdash is going to fall from the sky, so that was like a real live feeling of how certain things can just like fall from the sky and things can incredibly change over there. Or this is going to come from beneath, from Am Yisrael, from actually physically building. And that's part of the question, and how this actually leads to Achdut. So I'm going to bring up the sources for about that in 1 minute. Before I do, I want to say another short story, which I think actually brings us a lot of our feelings towards Beit HaMikdash, is like summarized in this one little short tidbit. Years ago, when Am Yisrael were still, unfortunately, had a lot of sinat chinam, and still was hard to see us getting our act together. A friend of mine said, people talk about Beit HaMikdash and how we're supposed to be building Beit HaMikdash, and we want to build a Beit HaMikdash, and this is what we're praying for right now. But honestly, if it was built right now, Khalila would be destroyed right away. Because in the end of the day, there's still so much sinat chinam that basically we have to get our act together before we even lead up to that mikdash. And I think the idea that she was saying is something that a lot of us have in our minds, which is first and foremost, we've got to clean up our act. First and foremost, we have to, feel like one nation, all get together, be able to talk peacefully with each other and feel like we're one nation. And only after we sort of clean up our act in that way could we even go towards building the mikdash. And what I want to suggest is that almost opposite, meaning we're almost going to be working opposite, that as part of cleaning up our act, as part of getting ourselves to be one nation, which I think is very, very clear to everyone that this is what we need always, and of course in a time like now, but that always needs to be done. Cleaning up our act in that way and in that sense is actually building the mikdash, is actually forming that place where we recognize that Hashem is one, and at that very place, and having that space and home for Hashem's presence to be, that is what actually forms Achdut, and not that it's like the end of a process. Okay, so for that, I want to see the two different schools of thought in terms of the mikdash. Is it something that's going to be coming from above, something from below? How should this be done? And a little bit of history, basically. Okay, so I'm going to share. This is a little bit bigger also, so you can see. Mostly right now, this is going to be just verses, so we can see. Okay, so in terms of even just having a mikdash, having one place for us to serve God and not taking away from any little shtibo or show or place to pray. But having one place in terms of service. So in Devarim, true that we already had Mishkan and a place that all of Am Yisrael would bring the korbanot, and a place that was in the middle of the camp of Am Yisrael. But in Devarim, in Parshat Re'eh, Moshe says to Am Yisrael, אלה החוקים והמשפטים אשר תשמעו לעשות בארץ, אשר נתן השם אלוקי אבותיך לך לרשתה. כל הימים אשר אתם חיים על האדמה. Okay, these are the rules. This is the rule book that you guys have to do all the days that you are in Eretz Yisrael. Abed ta'abdun. Sorry, put it up here. Abed ta'abdun את כל המקומות אשר עבדו שם הגויים. Okay, first of all, make space. Make space for Kadosh Baruch Hu means to get rid of all the other avodah zarah and idolatry that's there, and get rid of it. All the places that עבדו שם הגויים אשר אתם יורשים אותם את אלוהיהם על ההרים הרמים ועל הגבעות ותחת כל עץ רענן. Meaning, first of all, to get rid of Eretz Yisrael from all of avodah zarah and idolatry. והתחצתם את מזבחותם, and get rid of their altars. ושיברתם את מצבותם, and any kinds of word for it, but that any kind of other kind of monuments that they would make. ואשריהם תשרפון באש, and to get rid of completely to get rid of and burn anything that they would bow down to. פסילי אלוהיהם תגדעו, איבדתם את שמם מן המקום ההוא. Okay, all this is what you do to avodah zarah in Eretz Yisrael. לא תעשו כן להשם אלוקיכם. Obviously, this is not what you do to Hashem, the opposite. כי אל המקום אשר יבחר השם אלוקיכם מכל שבטיכם. Rather, at the specific place that God will choose, יבחר השם אלוקיכם מכל שבטיכם, from any one of your tribes. לשום את שמו שם, in order to put his name there, לשכנו תדרשו ובאת שמה. Okay? The word תדרשו is interesting because to lidrosh something is to come and ask for it. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit about is this something that we're coming to ask for, that we're looking for? Or is this something that's sort of coming from above that we know about, that we're coming just to put its place, but it's not us actually like looking for it. And you will bring there your sacrifices, olot and zevach. The difference, of course, is that olot going all the way just to Hashem, whereas the zevach is something that's a korban that we eat some of it. The ma'asrot, turumot, your tithes, and nidrechem and nidvotechem, anything that you guys promise and vow that you will bring there. And the firstborn, bechorot bekerbecha, from your bakar and your tzon, meaning all the cattle, firstborn that you will bring. And you'll eat there before Hashem. ושמחתם בכל משלחתכם, אתם ובתיכם, אשר ברכך השם אלוקיך. And you'll be happy there, you and your family, that God will bless you there. But then there's a warning. לא תעשו ככל אשר אנחנו עושים פה היום, איש כל הישר בעיניו. Don't do what we're doing here today. Says Moshe, this is not the same thing you're going to do once you go into Eretz Yisrael. כי לא באתם עד עתה אל המנוחה ואל הנחלה אשר השם אלוקיך נותן לך. Because until now you haven't come to this resting place and your inheritance of what Hashem is going to give you. ועברתם את הירדן, and only once you cross over the Jordan, וישבתם בארץ, and you guys sit in Eretz Yisrael, אשר השם אלוקיכם מנחיל אתכם, once he gives you to inheritance, והניח לכם מכל אויביכם מסביב וישבתם בטח. And he gives you this space after you don't have all these enemies around. וישבתם בטח, and you guys are sitting comfortably. והיה, and it should be, המקום אשר יבחר השם אלוקיכם, בואו לשכן שמו שם, שמה תביאו את כל אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם. Then you will have a specific place that God has chosen to put his Shekhinah and to rest there. עולותיכם וזבחיהם, מעשרותיכם ותרומתכם וכל מבחר נדריכם אשר תדעו השם. And that one specific place is where you'll bring everything. ושמחתם לפני השם אלוקיכם, and then you will bring simcha and joy. אתם ובניכם ובנותיכם ועבדיכם ואימותיכם, meaning you guys all as your family members, you, your sons, your daughters, slaves, and the Levi asher b'sha'arecha ki eno chelek v'nachala itzcha, and those who don't have the inheritance and who will be working there like the Leviim. כי שמר לך פן תעלה עולותיך בכל מקום אשר תראה. But make sure that you don't have a bama, you don't have different places. Everywhere you think that this is where you should put an altar, even though, of course, it's to Hashem. We're not talking about idolatry. We're talking about just creating different spaces for Avodat Hashem. Because, says Moshe, כי אם במקום אשר יבחר השם באחד שבטיך, שם תעלה עולותיך ושם תעשה כל אשר אנוכי לצדך. Okay? Only this place that God chooses, or the truth is, it says, will choose, okay? That's where you have to bring the olot. So we have it clearly in Dvarim that once we go into Eretz Yisrael, things will be different. And mostly that we are going to have to build a space that only there is where we're going to actually be serving Hashem in a certain way when it comes to bringing the korbanot, etc. It does say, though, a few things. Again, it says the tidoshu, meaning you're going to have to like sort of look for that. I'm going to talk about that. But it also says that it's not going to happen right away. Meaning you're going to come in, and first of all, of course, there's going to be this, you have to inherit the land, and there's going to be war. And only afterwards, when you don't have all those, and you're going to sit betach. Okay? And the question is, at what point exactly is that? If we just read the different psukim of Shmuel, and we think about when was it exactly, at what point, Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, a lot of us tend to think it was actually in Shlomo's time. Maybe David thought that at his point of time, he was ready for that because he saw that he was sitting and he did have a lot of different wars he went out to. But at some point in the end of his life, David felt like he was sitting comfortably. And he says to Nathanael, I'm ready. Like, I'm sitting here in this beautiful home, and we haven't built a home for Hashem. Um, and seemingly, what should be done is just build this home for Hashem. In Divrei Hayamim, we hear why David did not build it, because he went out to so many wars, and only in the time of Shlomo it will be built. But Hashem says to David, "Are you going to build it for me? I haven't had this since. I've constantly been going around different places and haven't had this place of dwelling and sitting." And it could be that what Hashem was actually saying was, I could have had this before, meaning you were the first David to wake up to even talk about this, but it could have been done before this. Let's look at the Ramban for 1 second on this. Okay, so let's look at a few things. First of all, we just saw the Parshat Re'eh, and on Parshat Re'eh, it says, like we said, Lidrosh, like you're supposed to be looking for it, you're supposed to actively be creating that place. And one of the things that Moshe said, right? The place will be one space that Hashem decides from all the tribes that, this is the center, and this is where Hashem wants the Beit HaMikdash to be built. The Sifri, right, the Midrash on this parsha says, Dosh al Pinavi, okay, meaning it's a prophet who's going to tell you this. So seemingly, you should be waiting around until the prophet tells you that. Yechol tamtin ad yomar lecha navi, meaning the drosh, the look for it is wait until a prophet tells you that this is the right place, because how are you supposed to know that this is actually the place that Hashem wants? It wasn't so clear that it was going to be Yerushalayim, and then it was going to be a Har HaBayit, and only afterwards, retrospectively, once that place was decided, we could say, oh yeah, that was the same place in Zakat Yitzchak, and this was the place that was known already ahead of time. But until now, when Moshe is talking to Am Yisrael and explaining about this place that's going to be, it's unclear where it's going to be, right? Har Hashem Yireh, we don't even know at this point where exactly that's going to be, that Hashem is going to pick this place to be. And it says, Josh Pinavi. So the Midrash asks, are we supposed to wait? Are we supposed to wait until the prophet comes and tells us? Talmud Lomar, and therefore it says, Lishichno tidrshu, uvata shama drosh umatzo, v'achar kach yomar lecha navi. Meaning, no, you're not supposed to be waiting for the prophet to tell you. You're supposed to be looking for it. You're supposed to be searching. You're supposed to be going there. Lishichno tidrshu, right? Look for a place for his Shekhinah to dwell. Uvata shama, and go there, and drosh v'matzo, and look for it, and then a Navi will tell you that this is true. So this is a very interesting midrash, because even though at the end of the day, the prophet's coming to tell us where this is actually going to be, it's starting from us, and it's supposed to start from us. And that drosh is, lidrosh mashu, is to come and ask for it, and to look for it, and to look for this place, and only afterwards the prophet comes and says, okay, good pick. But seemingly, it's not like we're sitting around waiting for the prophet to tell us where it's supposed to be. On this, which will bring us to the story I was talking about with David, I want to bring a famous Ramban. And the Ramban is not in Dvarim, it's actually on Parshat Korach. And in Parshat Korach, Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, separate yourselves from the rest of the nation, and I will get rid of them. And of course, Moshe and Aaron say, could it be that one person is the one to blame, right? Korach is the one to bring all, is the one to start rebelling and maybe bringing Am Yisrael to be against Moshe and Aaron, but one person is actually the one sinning. Why would Hashem want to wipe out of all Am Yisrael for that? So Ramban says like this: Yesh lish'ol, right? There is to ask. If Am Yisrael were not the ones to sin, v'lo mardu berubam, and most of them weren't having this rebellion, weren't rebelling. Lama haya ketzef alehem, lemor v'achla otam karega. If so, why was this? Why was Hashem so mad at them? So that Hashem said, "I will get rid of them in a minute, in a moment." If it's not true, all Am Yisrael were part of this rebellion. Meaning, how could that make sense that Moshe and Aaron would say, one person sinning, why would Hashem be mad at everybody else? Meaning, it has to be somewhere in between. What is it? What was happening actually? Was it all Am Yisrael against Moshe and Aaron, or was it just Korach? If it was all of Am Yisrael, so then how can Moshe and Aaron say to Hashem, why are you getting mad at all of Am Yisrael? It was just Korach. But if it was everybody, and if it wasn't everybody, it was just Korach, then what was Hashem thinking? And the Rabban explains, in the beginning, the nation really did believe in their heart, and they went after Moshe and Aaron. And when Korach and his whole people that went with him, each one took their incense, and they stood there also in the front of the Ol Moed with Moshe and Aaron. אז קרא קורח לכל העדה, ואמר להם, כי בכבוד כולם הוא מקנא. Okay? Korach said, I'm doing this for all of you guys, meaning I'm doing this for everyone's honor and not just for myself. ויטב הדבר בעיניהם. And the truth is, this thing seems like good to them. Actually, maybe it will go back now to the firstborn. We're supposed to be in, like, every family will have a family member who's going to be working in the Mishkan, and not just Moshe and Aaron. And they all came to see, maybe God actually wants this. And what was originally supposed to be, it's all going to go back to the firstborn. And that's what it means. The Korach took and cut and brought together, right, as in a community, kahal. He brought all these people together. Meaning all of Am Yisrael actually were needed to be destroyed because of that. Because they were thinking to themselves something against Moshe and Aaron. And when they take the people that Hashem decided are going to be the leaders, and they think that maybe these people shouldn't be the leaders and rebel against them, it's like going against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And they went against their prophecy. And they were chalav mitabedei shamayim, that they actually needed to die because of that. And Moshe and Aaron wanted to give them credit. And they wanted to put all the blame just on Korach. That really Korach was the one to. It's true, everybody sort of rebelled against Moshe and Aaron in the sense that they saw what Korach was saying as possibly the right thing. But the person who was actually bringing them to do this was Korach himself. And it should be that only Korach should die. Okay? All this is brings the Rabban to think about another story where the leader says, I'm the one who did something wrong. What's with everybody else? Okay? And the Ramban brings this long story, and he brings in David. And we know that in the end of the days, David was counting Am Yisrael, and he started to count. And when he did count them, Hashem got very angry at Am Yisrael, and there was a plague that killed 70,000 people in Am Yisrael. And this is where we see the end of the plague happening when David brings this, he finally, makes an altar at a place that's eventually going to be the place for the Mikdash in Yerushalayim. But David says, let whatever is happening, whatever punishment has to happen. Let it happen with me and my family and not with all of Am Yisrael. What did they do? What did they do wrong? And the Ramban explains actually what Am Yisrael did do wrong. Okay? Let's just see if I brought the psukim so we can first see. All right. Okay. The story is told twice, like a lot of things are in Shmuel and Melachim and in Devarim, as parallel stories. So this time I'm going to read the one in Divrei Hayamim. There's a little bit of a different version and a few differences in Shmuel. ויעמוד שטן על ישראל, ויסת את דוד למנות את ישראל. Okay? A Satan, right, comes in order to sort of bring David to count the nation. So this counting the nation, there's a lot of different questions of why David decided to count the nation of at this time. We see in general the counting of the nation throughout Bamidbar was in order to for the army. And we're going to see here also that a lot of this was for the army. Some people saw this as seemingly some people say that Yoav, the reason why he didn't like this idea was because it looked like David was again trying to see that everybody's on his side, and even that not just, his one tribe, but also all the other tribes are going to actually fight with him when he needs them, and therefore he's counting them. We think sometimes that things are so new nowadays, and this whole idea of, okay, who is going to come into the army and making sure that each person that we count is going to, every person that sends that Tzav Rishon is going to be part of the army. And what about those who, don't have to go to the army for all kinds of different circumstances or doing other things? We think this is all new, but the truth of the matter is there's a lot of parallels to this in the Tanakh too. And this seemingly is one of them, meaning David wants to see who's with me, right? And he's counting Am Yisrael, possibly also for that, just to see, wait a minute, how many chayalim do I have? And are all these people who are not necessarily from my tribe still going to fight and, be part of my army when I need them? So that was how some people saw it. And possibly Yoav was also saying to David, no reason to do this right now. No reason to start, counting up and getting some people to be like, wait, I'm not going to be part of the army. I'm not going to come. When we need them in real time, they'll come. This is not the way to do it. But anyway, again, we had these two parallel stories and with slight differences that a lot of times the Chazal try to sort of put together. And it says that this Satan came and sort of veered and took David to be counting Am Yisrael. And of course, it seems like here David was just like a part of that, but the problem wasn't necessarily just David. And David says to Yoav and Sarei Ha'am, Lechu sifot Yisrael miBe'er Sheva v'ad Dan. Ve'heviu elai ve'dat misparam, count of all Am Yisrael. I want to see how much they are. And Yoav tries to stop him. Yosef Hashem al amo kahem 100 pamim. Halo Adoni hamelech kulam la'adoni la'avadim. Okay, and this is interesting because Yoav says, everybody is serving you, meaning everybody's going to come to the army when you need them. You don't need to count them right now. And again, this is something that Rav Melamed talks about in Dvarim, how leaving, once we left Egypt, the time that we were in the Midbar was actually, getting Am Yisrael to be warriors because they had to go out to fight. And, part of eating the man was like eating what we call today the manot karav. You get that hard, food, whatever you have that you're able to eat when you're actually out on battlefield. And the constantly counting them to see how many they are and how many they can fight. And even the idea of how, they had to move around right away whenever Hashem, says, now we're moving, they move. Very similar to when they're in the army, lying down in the field, and then the officer gets up and says, "Guys, we're up in a minute. One more minute. We're all trained and ready." And basically, their time in the midbar, which was supposed to be a lot less than it actually ended up being, was supposed to be this basic training. It was supposed to be basic training to get into the army. One interesting thing when we read this today and how incredibly relevant all this is of course we know when they were leaving Egypt, right? Lo nacham Elohim derech eretz plishtim ki karov hu. They were supposed to go through Rafiah into Gaza. That's where they were supposed to go into. They were leaving Egypt, and obviously leaving from Egypt, that's exactly the way into Eretz Israel. And they weren't ready for that yet. They didn't have the basic training yet. So bringing them around and about was supposed to give them both the emunah and the basic training that they needed in order to go into Eretz Israel. Okay, so back to us. Yoav says to David, everybody's with you. Everybody is a servant to you. Lama yivakesh zot adoni. Why do you need this? Lama yeh la'ashma l'Yisrael. But David was very adamant about this. And he goes through all of Eretz Israel in order to at least the whole northern part in the beginning and gets to Yerushalayim when he's counting Am Yisrael. And he gives the amount to David, okay? And we see that this is, about the army, because it even tells us the amount based on how many shotvei cherev, how many people that we're going to have to fight, how many in Israel and how many in Yehuda. And again, seemingly this was part of like David's tactic of how many are with me, how many are going to be with me when I need them, etc. But Levi and Binyamin, he didn't, because Yoav really did not want to count them. Next pasuk, Vayira be'enei halokim adavar hazeh. And this thing got Hashem really, really upset. Vayachat Yisrael, and Hashem starts giving a plague and striking Am Yisrael. And David says, "Vayom David Elokim chatati maod asher asiti et hadavar hazeh, va'ata haver na avoni avdecha ki niskati maod." And David understands right away that this is because of him. And it says that Hashem gave a plague to Am Yisrael and that 70,000 people died. And then there's this story, Vayishlach Elokim malach leYerushalayim hashchita, that Hashem sends this malach, angel of death, to Yerushalayim to also wipe out there. And when Hashem saw this, Vayinachem al ha'ra'ah, and he decides not to do this, and he says to Malach, Rav, enough, ata haref yadecha. Malach Hashem omed in Goren Arnan HaYebusi, and where he's actually standing is in this place of Arnon HaYebusi, where he was gathering wheat, making wheat maybe, and David sees this. Vayisa David et Hadav vayart Malach Hashem omed ben haaretz uben hashamayim. David sees this Malach Hashem that's basically between heavens and earth, and how he's ready to fight. He has this sword in his hand, the Chalbosh L'Fa B'Yado, on Yerushalayim. And Vayipol David v'Azkenim mechusim b'sakim ad pneihem, and everyone's like covered, and David falls. And then David says to Hashem, "Vayom David Elokim, alo ani amarti limnot ba'am, v'ani hu asher chatati, v're'ah hare'ota, ve'ela hatzon ma'asu." I'm at fault, right? David says, "I'm the head, okay? I'm the one who even said to count Israel. What were they doing? They didn't do anything. Why don't you do something wrong to my family? Why are you doing this to all of Am Yisrael?" We're not going to read the rest of the story right now because I want to just get to the Ramban and how he sees this. Okay? Ramban says, "V'zu derech mevakshe rachamim." That is the way people also ask a lot of times for mercy, like David in this case. Sheyekelu hachet me'al ha'am, that the nation should have less of a sin and less of also a punishment. V'notnim oto ala yachid hagorem, and they explain that it's really just one person that is it's really at fault of this. Mipnei shuhu chayav al kol panim. And this is what David said. Hinei anochi chatati v'anochi abiti, meaning I'm the person who was at fault. And Ela Hatzon Ma'asu, and Am Yisrael as the sheep. What do they do? Tihina yadcha biu beit Avi. V'haya ha'onesh hahu al ha'am gam b'chat'am. But here, Ramban says, the truth is, everybody was at fault. As they're going to be counted, they were supposed to give machatzit shekel. When they were being counted, they didn't have to just, raise their hands or be like, here's my number. They should have given a shkalim. And what are these shkalim for? We hear that every time we're supposed to be counted, the Torah tells us that we have to give the machatzit shekel, that we have to give a half a shekel. And only once we give the machatzit shekel, that's how we're supposed to be counted later on, in order for there not to be a plague amongst Am Yisrael. And that was something that Am Yisrael could have done. Im ha'onesh hu al zeh kedivrei rabotenu, ki lo tziva otam hamelech shelo yitnu hashkalim. It wasn't that David said, don't give your shkalim. Of course they could have given. Ki hu ladat haminyan bilvad haya chafetz. What David wanted to know was, how many people, more like how many soldiers, do I have with me? But the truth of the matter is, they were also at fault. Am Yisrael were also at fault, because he didn't tell them how to count. He just said to count. But they could have given their machatzit shekel. They could have given their half a shekel. כי מלבד המניין היה עונש על העם מתחילת דבר, כי דכתיב, ויוסף אף השם לחרות בישראל, ויסת את דוד בהם. Meaning, it says, God was angry. At Shmuel Beck, it says, God was angry with Am Yisrael, and then he, took David to be the one to sort of count them in order to punish them. But it says there, "Vayosef Hashem af Hashem lechorot beYisrael," and Hashem gets upset again with Am Yisrael, and it's unclear with what. It doesn't say there what Hashem was mad about. And Katav Sham Rashi, and the Ramban says that Rashi says, "Lo yadati alma." I don't know what that was. And the truth is, I feel like we all have feelings like that sometimes, or our kids have that feeling sometimes, or we as children had that feeling of, we're not sure what our parents are necessarily upset about. It could be sometimes, a spouse, or sometimes our parents, and sometimes it's like frustrating. Wait a minute, what did I do wrong? And here there's this pasuk that says Hashem gets mad at Am Yisrael, and he brings David to, right, or the Satan in a certain case maybe, to count Am Yisrael in order to give them this punishment. And Rashi says, why? Okay? Vani omer b'derech svara. And the Ramban says, and I'll tell you seemingly what this was all about. Shehaya onesh al Yisrael b'itacher binyan beit ha'bechira. The punishment was for Am Yisrael that were taking too long to build the Beit HaMikdash. Shehaya Aaron holech mi'oel al oel kiger ba'aretz. That the Aaron Brit Hashem was just going from place to place, tent to tent, as if they're a stranger in the land of Eretz Yisrael. That was the Aaron, the Luchot HaBrit. Instead of being in one place that Hashem wanted it to be, it was going around Eretz Yisrael as if it was a stranger in the land. ואין השבטים מתעוררים לאמור נדרוש את השם נבנה הבית לשמו. And the different tribes weren't getting up in order לדרוש את השם and saying, wait a minute, we should be building a Beit HaMikdash. Like it says, לשכנו תדרשו ובאת. This is what we read in Dvarim, that this is something that we're supposed to do. This is something very active, says the Ramban. This is not something you're passively supposed to be waiting for. And like we saw, the Midrash said, you're not supposed to be waiting for the prophet to tell you this is when it's going to happen. Fall down to the Beit HaMikdash, we'll all pray in our little shtibel or in our shul or whatever it will be, and one day this will happen. This is something that you're supposed to make happen. They're supposed to make this happen. And Hashem was mad at Am Yisrael that they weren't doing that. Okay, it took David a long time. First of all, says the Rabbanit, it shouldn't have even been David. It's true, the verses tell us that it could have happened, it needs to happen only after we're sort of settled in the land and don't have all of our attacks. And when we read Shoftim and Yoshua, all through Yoshua and all through Shoftim, we're like, okay, well, we're still having lots of attacks. But the truth is, we have many times where it says, and now there was like 40 years of peace and quiet in the land. And what Ramban says is, where were you guys this whole time? Am Yisrael was supposed to be waking up to say, this is what we want done. We want this Beit HaMikdash to be built, and we have to go look for a place. And through all the Shvatim, we should have been getting up and saying that this whole time until David finally did it. Even David did it very, very late in the game. מימים רבים ולזמן ארוך, שנאמר, ויהי כי ישב המלך בביתו, והשם הניח לו מסביב מכל אויביו, ויאמר מלך נתן אבי, אנוכי יושב בבית הארזים, ואהרון אלוקים יושב בתוך הראייה. Okay, meaning it took a long time for David also to finally be sitting and saying, you know what am I doing here, sitting in this beautiful, beautiful palace, and Aaron Hashem is sitting here and doesn't have like a one place to be. והנה דוד מנעו השם יתברך מפני שאמר כי דברים רבים שפע הארץ לפניי. Okay, and it says in דברי הימים that Hashem did not let David actually build it. ונתאחר עוד הבניין, and therefore it even took longer time until it was built. עד מלוך שלמה. ואילו היו ישראל חפצים בדבר, but if Am Yisrael really wanted this to happen, ונתעוררו בו מתחילה, and they would have had been waken up to this to begin with, נעשה בימי אחד השופטים. It could have happened with one of those times in the Shoftim, all these judges that came. Every time the judge came and there was another war, and we read it as if it's, you know, nothing, but when you're living it, it's incredibly painful and hard for Am Yisrael to go through these wars. And then there's this period of time of quiet, thank God, and that was the time that Am Yisrael should have been waking up to build a Beit HaMikdash, or Beimei Shaul, or גם בימי David, and even David could have done this beforehand. כי אם שבטי ישראל היו מתעוררים בדבר, it didn't have to be that David came so late in the game. It could have been Am Yisrael in David's time said we want this. לא היה הוא בונה, it wouldn't be necessarily David who would be building, אבל ישראל הם היו בונים. But Am Yisrael would be the ones who were building it before them. אבל כאשר העם לא השגיחו, but when the nation didn't care about it enough, didn't wake up for it enough. ודוד הוא המשגיח והמתעורר, he was the only one finally, after so long, to say, wait a minute, we need to build a Beit HaMikdash. ועל כן יתאחר הבניין כל ימי דוד בפשיעת ישראל. And therefore, this whole time that David was alive and king, it took so long because Am Yisrael didn't do it, and that was Pshiat Yisrael, meaning that was something that Am Yisrael should have waken up to do, and that was their fault that they hadn't. Al ken haya haketsef alehem, and therefore God got angry at them and gave this incredible plea to Am Yisrael. ועל כן היה מקום אשר יבחר השם לשום שמו שם, נודע בעונשם ומגבתם. As we know in the end of the story, which we're going to read in a minute, it ended in the place of a mikdash. והכתוב ירמוז על זה, and there is a hint of that in the psukim, שנאמר, כי לא ישבתי בבית מיום העליתי בני ישראל מצרים ועד היום הזה. והיה מתהלך, meaning this in the psukim is what Hashem said to David, I haven't sat in a dwelling place since the time Am Yisrael left Mitzrayim, and I just keep going around and around. בכל אשר התהלכתי, בכל בני ישראל, הדבר דיברתי את אחד שבטי ישראל, אשר ציוויתי לראות את עמי ישראל לאמור, למה לא בניתם לי בית ארזים? Until now, I haven't, seemingly we could have read this psukim to be, I haven't said to one of the judges, you know, why didn't you build a Beit HaMikdash? But here the Ramban is saying, why didn't they? Why didn't any of the judges or Am Yisrael at any of the time of any of the judges come and say, wait a minute, we don't have a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu here. Harei Ya'ashim HaKatuv, and therefore the Torah, the Navit is telling us that we're at fault for that. Ki hashchina mitalechet b'kol Yisrael mi'oel al oel, that the Shekhinah is sort of looking for a dwelling place among all of Israel, from tent to tent, umishkan a mishkan, v'lo haya echad b'kol shoftei Yisrael haro'im otam mitorer b'davar, and none of the leaders until now woke up to this thing. V'amar katuv od, and it says more again in the Navit, ki gam Hashem rachak mehem ולא דיבר לאחד מכולם לבנות הבית, רק אתה שנתעוררה התיבות כי היה עם לבבך, וצווה אתה לבנותו על ידי שלמה בנך, שיהיה איש שלום. Meaning only when David finally woke up to do this, it was planned out, we know it was called by what David did, even though Shlomo was the one to build it. But says the Ramban, all of this was very, very, very late. And Am Yisrael should have woken up to do this way, way beforehand. Okay, I see we only have a little bit of time left, and I just want to see a few things. One is, like I said, in Shmuel, the same story is brought, and it starts like we saw this pasuk. But Yosef af Hashem lecharot beIsrael, and God again gets angry with Am Yisrael, and therefore he sort of gets David to start counting Israel and Yehuda, and that's where Ramban quotes Rashi and says, "What was he mad at them for?" And the long Ramban that we saw right now is he was mad at Am Yisrael because they didn't wake up um, to make a dwelling place for Hashem in the Mikdash. And in the end of the story that we can read from Divrei Yamim or from Shmuel, but I think they're both very similar stories. But what's interesting is the end of Divrei Yamim, David is told to go to Arnan and there to build this altar. And as we see, there was a place of wheat, and he was harvesting there. And it wasn't necessarily a place that people even thought would be, a mountain that the Beit HaMikdash was going to be built. But David decides there to build it, and he is told to go to Arnan. And he goes there. Vayomer David ad Arnan, Tzna li makom hagoren, I wanted this place. Ve'evne bo mizbeach laHashem bekesef maleh, and I'll give you a lot of money for it. And that will be the end of this terrible plague on Am Yisrael. And of course, Arnan is like, I don't need any money for this. Take it, and I will even give you all that you need in order to make an altar here and to put the sacrifice. But David says, no, I need to buy this. And this is one of the places that Chazal say there are a few places that nobody could ever say this is not Am Yisrael's. Ma'at Machpelah in Hebron that Abraham paid a lot of money for. Shechem that Yaakov Avinu paid for, and that's where Kever Yosef is in the end of the day. And here, Har HaBayit, ki kano ikne bekesef maleh, right? And he pays a lot of money for it. And there's two different versions, both in Shmuel and in Divrei Yamim, that Chazal try to put together in terms of how much money he actually paid for it. But here it says 600, golden coins. And this is one of those places of Am Yisrael that there's no question about. And David makes an altar there, and he calls before Hashem, and Hashem answers him. And they actually see this as, almost, death or near death at that point. And he built an altar. And the end of it is Vayomer David Zehu Beit Hashem Elokim V'zeh Mizbeach Lo LaYisrael, meaning this is the place that David decides for it to be Beit Hashem. What's interesting about this pasuk is that it wasn't so clear, right? In Dvarim we have Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem, Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem. Once there will be that God will choose a place, and it's true that David was told to make an altar at this place, but he wasn't told that this is going to be the place for Beit HaMikdash. And seemingly, at least according to Chazal, David sat and with the wise of his generation to try to figure out where to build the Beit HaMikdash. One of the saddest stories, if we go back to what we talked about originally in terms of Achdut of Am Yisrael and bringing all the nations together, is where we see the time and time again, actually, that Am Yisrael were the most had the most amount of were the most separated and hatred. So the famous place, of course, is Shechem, and it started there with the story of Yosef. And that place could have been a big tikkun. But unfortunately, the person who decides for it to be the exact opposite is Yeravam. And it says in Melachim, Vayiven Yeravam et Shechem b'Har Ephraim v'yashev ba. Okay, Yeravam, who is from Ephraim and who is from Yosef and who is seemingly able to bring that nation together again as a tikkun for what happened to Yosef. He does the exact opposite. Okay, as we know, Yeravam was the king of Am Yisrael after Shlomo. David still had, David's lineage still had one of the tribes, which was Yehuda, and Shlomo continued on with his son Rechavam. But one person who rebelled against him was Yeravam. And Chazal tell us in Masechet Sanhedrin that Yeravam has no place in Olam Haba. And Yeravam says to himself, Ata teshuva mamlacha leBeit David. If we keep the Beit HaMikdash, what I'm worried about is that everyone's going to go back to Beit David, meaning everyone's going to come together again. That's what Yeravam is worried about. If 3 times a year, or besides for that, every time somebody has a sacrifice to give, they go up to Yerushalayim to be giving these sacrifices. What's going to actually happen is people are going to get rid of me, and they're going to go back to the lineage of David, and this is going to cause the nation to all be one, Yisrael and Yehuda, in one place. And he decides to ask his men of what he should do. And not stam the Navit talks about these iglei zahav to remind us of the egla zahav, and using the same wording. You don't have to go to Yerushalayim anymore. This is like the God who took you out of Egypt. We're going to have a whole different mikdash here. In the beginning, what Yeravam originally built was bamot. He wasn't building an altar for Avodah Zarah. He wasn't trying to say, let's, serve a different God. It was, let's serve God, just not in the Beit HaMikdash. Let's make different places that we can serve God. You don't have to go all the way to Yerushalayim. It could be anywhere else in Israel. You could be serving God. And seemingly this was something that was done originally, and he's just sort of going back to that, says Yeravam. And it's also more convenient, that you guys have something local, says Yeravam. But of course, we hear what Yeravam's real plan was to make sure that there's no achdut in Am Yisrael. And unfortunately, he was successful for a very, very long time. And therefore, he has no place in Olam Haba, because in the end of the day, what we're really looking for is that one place that we actually can all come together as a nation. And that place needs to be the Mikdash. We need to leave that space for Hashem to dwell amongst us. And I want to end with a famous Rashi, even though we have, many different people, different commentators who say we're actually going to build this famous Rambam, of course, and the Meiri on the same Masechet Sukkah that says that we're going to be physically building the Beit HaMikdash. Many commentators say that. Even Rashi himself in Yechezkel says that we're going to actually be physically building the Beit HaMikdash. In Masechet Sukkah, there's a whole question of when the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built. And one of the things that's suggested is maybe it will be built at night, and Rashi says, well, it can't really be built at night, and it's also not going to be, built on Yom Tov. How do we do this? And Rashi says there, the Mikdash, the Atid that we're looking for is going to come straight from heaven. Like it says, Mikdash Hashem kodedu yadecha. And even though not everybody agrees with Rashi on this, the question is, so what's actually going to happen in the end of the day? This is something that we're supposed to be doing and looking for, and it's terrible if we don't, like the Ramban says, or this is something that's just going to be coming from heaven, and all we're waiting for is for it to come down. The Maharal puts these things together, and he says like this: כי אלו השבטים על ידם ישראל הם אחד, כי על ידי בית המקדש ישראל אחד, ונאסרו הבמות, והיה להם מזבח אחד. וכך תמצא שאמר משה לעדת קורח, קחו לכם מחטאות, ורוצה לומר כי יש לנו אל אחד, meaning this shows, the base mikdash shows how we have one place, and therefore we're not allowed to have different bamot, okay? Just want to end, sorry, quickly with the Aruch LaNer, who puts this all together. The Aruch LaNer on Masechet Sukkah says, of course we have to build a Beit HaMikdash. We can't go by the pshat of Rashi here and say that Beit HaMikdash is going to fall from the heavens, but and he even says that we're praying all the time that we should build a Beit HaMikdash. We shouldn't say we're praying for building the Beit HaMikdash. We should say we're praying for the Hofa'ah, that the Beit HaMikdash should be just like shown to us if it was actually going to be falling from the heavens. But says that Aruch LaNer, that what's actually going to happen is that we are going to build it, and God is going to put his presence in it, similar to creating people. When people were created, Hashem created, obviously, Adam me'adama, vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim, and he puts in a neshama. And says that Aruch LaNer, in the same way, this is going to be like a neshama laguf. The guf is going to be the Beit HaMikdash. We're going to have to build that physically, and Hashem will come and put in the neshama from the heavens, and that's part of that heaven and earth coming together. I want to summarize just that it's very clear that this Pesach and every Pesach, the first and foremost thing that we need as a nation is Achdut. We all need to come together as one nation, be one, and Bezrat Hashem bring the Korban Pesach as one. And I think what the sources are telling us is we shouldn't be waiting for the Beit HaMikdash to come once we all have our act together. Part of getting our act together as a nation is actually physically building the Beit HaMikdash, going up to Har HaBayit, Bikdusha, B'Tahara, when we're able to, learning the halachot about that and bringing the Beit HaMikdash b'mhera b'yameinu. And when we do, there will be a heavenly part to it. The heavenly part that's coming from heaven is going to be the neshama to the guf. In the same way that a person can't live without their neshama, and how Hashem puts that into each person that's born, so too Hashem will, in his presence, bring down the Shekhinah into this man-made, person-made mikdash that we will, Amir Hashem, build. And Bezrat Hashem, b'mhera b'yameinu, we should be zoche, and I hope we all come together soon to bring Ashkalim and to at least as much as possible put the cornerstones as David did, even though he wasn't able to physically build the Beit HaMikdash. He was able to get a lot of it ready and to put the cornerstones. So Bezrat Hashem, we should all be here in Israel as soon as possible. A good start would be coming for the summer and coming to learn with us, a big part of our Beit Midrash, and also coming to as much as possible up to Har HaBayit and up to be building the Beit HaMikdash b'mhera b'yameinu. Chag Kasher v'Sameach.